Right, welcome to a lot of you know about PlayWright already, hopefully. If you don't, I'm just gonna a short explanation about what it can do, and then we'll go into a little demo to see what it actually does and how some of those things I'm going to talk about are kind of true or not true. Depends on how you use it. So just a quick overview. When should we use PlayWright or integration tests? Why should we use them? And what? I've kind of answered it by saying it's Playwright, so spoilers. When and why. So they're not unit tests. We can't test everything, especially on existing systems. It's not feasible really. You could try, but the main idea is to test the main components so that you protect against any regression for existing features if they're being changed, to give us confidence in the code that we're writing and the tests that are there. Hopefully they will replace the user testing for the releases. So a lot of systems, probably most of them, will go through a full test of some sort. And usually it's either the BA or sometimes the customer as well that will test these things. I know, for example, on the customer has a big, massive spreadsheet of things that they go through to test every release to make sure it's all working. So hopefully with introduction of these integration tests, we can take that list, convert them into the tests and save them time and money. And that would then increase the confidence in the code base and the actual system from our side and from the customer side. Just from a personal example, on just when we had all these integration tests, I was very confident in any of the changes that we were making, any upgrades or logic changes, because we had so many integration tests that run through each time on a PR. The other thing is when we actually run these integration tests, at the minute, the thinking is if you can spin up containers and have them all contained in that. Alternatively, if you're not containerized and it's a big job to do that, one of the thinkings is to run them against UAT. So the why, cross-browser compatibility with PlayWright allows you to test across Chromium, so Chrome and Edge, Firefox, and Safari, which makes it nice and it covers all the main engines cross-platform. So run them locally on CI, whether it's Windows, Linux, or Mac OS. There's also the PlayWright service, which some of you might have heard of. It's something that we've looked into, but at the minute can't see much use for it, especially the way it works. It's still developing, so running on CI works really well. And lastly, multilingual support, so we can write things in whatever, TypeScript, JavaScript, .NET, Java. I believe the preferred one is TypeScript, like with a lot of the other frameworks that we use for these sort of things. And it's nice and easy. Everybody knows TypeScript. So let's quickly look at some of the features that PlayWright offers. So code generation. It has a nice ability to record your tests. Instead of writing them, you can record them by simply clicking on the website what you want to happen. Now we're going to go into the demo to see a little bit of that. Usually requires some manual tidy up, but it's nice as a starting point, and potentially something that BAs could get into to sort of record a basic idea of what we want to test or what they want to cover, and then a dev can tidy up. Automatic waiting. So if anybody's used Selenium or any other front end frameworks in the past, waiting is the biggest thing. So wait for things to load, appear, happen, and they become very flaky and very unstable. So with Playwright's automatic waiting, they say it helps to eliminate all of these things. But again, we'll see how it is and it isn't the case, and sometimes built-in reports. So various number of reporters are available. HTML, JSON, JUnit, various others that I've not heard of, but they exist and has the ability to plug into custom ones. And this is basically how you want to report, how you want to display the results of the test. They do out of the box. They look very nice and presentable. So if there's any requirements to make them anything else, then we can do that, or we can put them to JSON, feed them into other pipelines, other things like that. Whatever you want to do. It has an inspector which allows you to do a step-by-step check of everything that's happening within a test. So it has a nice breakdown of exactly what's happened in every step. So it's like debugging your tests themselves instead of just debugging the page that you're testing. Trace view is something that we'll see with Nick's demo. It's a replay basically of what's happened, essentially like a recording of the test. So each step is a screen grab, so you can see exactly what's happened on the page and trace it through. And if things are failing, you can see why. It makes it nice and easy. A video screenshot support. So again, like with I believe Selenium had this as well and other frameworks. You can get the results in video or test format to then replay back to yourself or somebody else to see this is what's been tested and covered. Parallel test execution. So has the ability, or as it says, you can run tests in parallel, which makes them nice and fast. And also has the ability to spread them across other different machines. I'm not sure we've done that, but it's there. And lastly, browser context creation. So instead of spinning up a full browser, you can run these in isolated little contexts that take a few milliseconds to launch, which makes things a lot faster to run. Demo time.
So I'm showing you the Abdu system, which is what we've retrofitted it onto. Not retrofitted it onto, which is what we've used as a demo system to do all of this. It's a nice internal system. It's fairly simple right now. It's only a couple of pages, couple of screens, so it's easy to add on to. And we could spend as long as we wanted because clients weren't paying. Well, not as long as we wanted. Clients weren't paying for it, so there was less pressure to kind of we got to investigate it more. Just very quickly, quick overview of Abdu. It's a absence management system. So you can go on, you can request absences. If you have a manager nominated, your manager then gets an email and has to go in and approve your absence. Fairly simple. The code for the integration tests is all here. So we have a folder called integration tests. The way it works is we currently do some setup. So we do some global setup stuff. So it's configured with PlayWright.config. So these are various things. So we retry it on CI, for example. We report things using JUnits. We are using those alternate JUnit stuff. We aren't actually running things in parallel. The reason we aren't running things in parallel is to do with setup. So it's a system that you have to log on to and maintain state for that user. We have only got one integration test user set up. If we ran things in parallel, the tests are very likely to start competing with each other. We'd need separate users for every test if we wanted to run it in parallel, because I also don't think you can't nominate tests to run on thread 1 and thread 2. So you can't say all tests that run on thread 1 use this sign-in, all tests that run on thread 2 use this sign-in. It would have to be a unique sign-in per test. So we've ended up not doing that. If your website is not a logged-in website, then it might be more useful for you to run things in parallel. There's nothing else interesting in this config file. We run it on CI in Docker containers, Docker Compose stuff. It's mostly fairly simple. So the backends are already Dockerized. The front ends are served as static web apps in Azure, but are served via Nginx containers in Docker. The tests themselves are very simple. So we have it's, as you can see, await page.goto, and we set the thing, click the login button, find the nav bar, click the nav bar open and check that you have 100 entitlements appears on the screen. Let me do something slightly more complicated. So we also have some shared things. So page.goto/ and then await manager login. This is a helper class that we have, a helper function we have set up, which will just fill in manager email, manager password, and sign in. So you can do that sort of shared code. It's just regular JavaScript code. You can call into functions wherever you want, but it means that you don't have to type in the login stuff every time. If we go to recording tests, for example, so what I've done here is I've set up some common stuff, this await page.goto, which you need if you're going to do recording tests, and then log in as the employee, reset the account, log in again and set up the employee. We do this employee login, reset account, and then reset up the employee, again, just to try to get us back to a clean slate, because we're using the one integration test user. If we have one test that tests, you can book entitlement, so it reduces your entitlement from 100 down to 90 days because you use 10 days of it. We need to wipe that test result out, basically, and we're currently doing that by doing it at the start of tests rather than the end of tests, because the start of tests always run. If a test fails, it doesn't run any cleanup stuff. You can, because it's just JUnit, you can do after all as well, after each, I think it is, yeah, after each. So we could do some teardown stuff in here as well. We just haven't because reasons. So let me show you what the recording looks like really quickly. So I'm going to click record at cursor. Here's one I made earlier. What you need is a Chromium puppeted browser. So a puppeted browser is this thing. but it means that you can see what it's going to select. So it's going to select the locator.calendar day there. When I click it, and if I switch back to this, it's added the code for me. Great, and then I can say, right, now click on that one, then that one, and that one. And it's added await page.label, get by label, submit. Great, cool. And then when I'm done recording my test, I can hit the stop record button, which looks really snazzy, looks really neat. It is fairly neat, I'm not going to lie to you. There are a couple of downsides. So firstly, it has kind of a hierarchy of what it will want to pick. Ideally, we're using test IDs when we manually write the tests, which is what we actually do most of the time. We use test IDs because they're immutable. PlayWright tries to be clever and will cascade down. So it'll do IDs if it can find an ID on the element, and then it will do labels, and then it will do by text. Ideally, what we'd actually be doing is changing the code to add IDs where we need IDs for the integration tests. It also records kind of static values, so it's always recording the February 24th. Of course, it's doing that, but again, in our code, if I flick over to some of the booking stuff, we actually do things. So these are before each. We kind of make it so that it's the previous business day, so the tests are always keeping up with current things, which again, the auto recorder is not going to be able to do that. Basically, what my thoughts about the auto recorder are, it's lovely, it's very good for non-technical users. As devs, we can type these words and we can type them better than the machine can type these words. So I'm not sure it's especially useful for us as devs, but you might want, if you have BAs that want to test a specific flow and you're struggling to communicate it, getting the BAs to click through it via PlayWright might make sense. In terms of running the tests at all, so you can run it locally, you can do either just the setup, just the teardown. I'm going to run the teardown because I had it all set up. It's as simple in Visual Studio Code. There's an add-on. I have never run them from not Visual Studio Code locally. Teardown, so this will log into both the user accounts we have set up, the employee and the manager, and reset them back to a blank slate. It's fairly cool to sit and watch generally, except when it breaks, because we're in the middle of a demo. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna restart all of this stuff, and then I'm gonna show you how it works and looks in CI. And then when we come back, hopefully all of this stuff will behave itself properly. So let's flick over to CI quickly. So we have a pipeline set up which runs it in CI. So we run it on every single PR. It takes a while. So a full test run will take 40 minutes, 20 minutes, 40 minutes. It runs on every PR currently. We've not been in a situation where that's been an issue yet, because we are a small system that only has that doesn't have a huge number of important users that are paying for it yet. I could see that you might only want to run this nightly. You could set that up in a separate job. For now, we're just running on everyone. So generally they all pass because Bhupinder knows how to write code. No one else is working on this. But if it doesn't, you can go into the build, go into the test, and you can see which test has failed. You get the console error, which is sometimes useful. It will tell you which one it's failing at. So it's trying to find the calendar year, and it's not finding the calendar year here, which is sort of useful. What's even more useful is the attachments. So is the trace viewer. So I have that set up over here. This is the trace viewer. So when the PlayWright runs the tests, it records everything. So it starts off, it shows you all of the stuff that PlayWright is doing. So these are all the like PlayWright. These are the stuff that PlayWright's doing. So PlayWright's saying, click the login button, click email address, fill email address, fill password, click the sign in button, click the calendar button. You can sort of see what's happening on the screen for every PlayWright locator, which is kind of useful. You also can scan up here and kind of watch a quick, there's no like play video stuff, but you can sort of scan up here and do a quick, okay, we're not going to do a local demo, apparently. It looks cool. It just runs it, opens up a Chromium window and runs it for you. runs through all the tests. But yeah, you can see a video of what it's doing. It also captures the inputs and outputs of the network tab. So the get mode returned to 401, which is fine. It is expected to do that. We can see get holiday year summary, the response of the body tells you how many proven taken. It's a fairly useful thing. It gives you all the, from what I've used it, it gives you all the stuff you actually want when debugging an integration test failure, which is way better than other trace viewers and capturers I've used. And it gives us an output, 3 of them. So 1, 2, 3, because we retry tests 3 times, it will give us all 3 outputs. Are there any questions, anything anyone wants to see desperately that isn't a demonstration?
Have you got the HTML view of those tests, like the whole list of them failing or passing? I don't know if you guys are running a HTML.
So we don't run because we're running the JUnit output. We get outputs into JUnit. This is the output that we're doing. But if you want to see what past tests we have as well, they're just all the ones under this integration test thing. So you can see. So we're not using the HTML reporter. We're just using the JUnit reporter.
Cool.
I have a question. It's not necessarily about PlayWright, but say Abdu, I didn't see how you logged in, but were you using ADB2C for that?
Yeah, so what we've done
so
is
how do you work that? Like going out there and then coming back in and all that?
It's fine. It's just a Chromium browser. It doesn't care.
Yeah,
Doesn't care
it's fine. Yeah.
So yeah, when you go to Abdu, the URL, it'll redirect you back to ADB2C.
Yeah.
Abdu doesn't care. The PlayWright doesn't care. Then we've pre-set up these accounts in ADB2C. So manager.
Right. Okay. Yeah. It's
so
simple as that.
Here
That's
is
cool.
the password and username. We just use those, and it types them in and then logs in. Yeah, because it's a full Chromium browser, it can go to whatever website you wanted it to.
Yeah.
It can do whatever redirects you want it to, and the way that we're running it in Docker in CI means that it can talk to the wider internet, so it can't just redirect to ADB2C.
Very nice.
Nick, is there a security risk here with if you've got credentials in a source file that's being held in a repo?
Vaguely, yeah.
There might be test credentials which can do something. Obviously, can run things on the system and get information.
Yeah, I mean, the way that Abdu is set up, there's not a large surface risk, because these accounts are reset. Are only integration testing accounts. They can access no data that is not their own, and they can only do it on UAT, and their accounts are reset after every test. It was just easier to have them in here. Ideally, we would have these in a secret file somewhere, user.secrets as part of JSON, and then pass that into the test. But this is fine for us, for our situation, for our threat profile. Your mileage may vary. If you're working on bank loans for bank approval statuses, even in test, you probably want to handle these credentials a bit better. But you could just put these in a secret file, because again, it's just TypeScript code. You can read secrets out however you read secrets out.
So you can easily
environment variables.
So you can easily read them out of Key Vault or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You could call it to Key Vault from here.
Well, if you're doing it on CI as well, that has capability of storing secrets within the pipeline, so you could just put them in there and then inject them out.
Yeah, there's many ways. Secret management is a whole thing. Agreed. Having the credentials in plain text is not entirely sensible, but is not actually a big problem for us as an Abdu system specifically.
And I'm very much interested in that automatic waiting that you guys mentioned. Like, how does
I was just going to say
work? What's that
so
about?
What it means, I don't know if it's not that revolutionary compared to Selenium, for example. It just means that it will test the page every 100 milliseconds, 200 milliseconds ish for this get by placeholder.
So it's not waiting in terms of wait for loaded, it's just wait 100 milliseconds between lines?
No, it is wait for loaded. So it is,
okay.
when you load the page up here, so we signed in and then it started spinning for a while here. You can see it here as it slowly span. What was actually happening here was it was waiting for the calendar icon to appear, but it was just going to, it will wait. What's happened on this test, this failed test, was it was waiting to it's expecting a dialog to automatically pop up to let you register. This was when our accounts weren't being reset correctly. So this was expecting a expecting to switch. Sorry, this was when manager wasn't working in CI. So it was expecting switch to manager mode to work to load a different page, but it wasn't loading, and it just waited for 2 minutes because that was the timeout we had set because we thought it might be a timeout thing for the manager mode for the page it was expecting to load. So it will just sit and wait for your UI to settle down until your locator shows up.
So it's pretty much just waiting for the exact thing you want to click by default. That's really cool, actually.
Yeah, historically, you'd have to basically all those things in between, you'd have to put them in manually. So you have to say wait for.
Yeah, which always ends
really-
with wait for 2 seconds and then click.
Exactly. Yeah, literally in between each sort of lines. Yeah, and that was
And it sucks.
that's what they're talking about.
I'm frustrated that I can't run this locally. I'm just going to restart everything. But it does run when the things are quick, when your UI is responding quickly, it runs real quick. So it doesn't have that automatic wait kind of. How long do we sit here and stare at it? How long timeout? If there is an overall timeout, which by default is set to 30 seconds. 30 seconds is a sensible-ish timeout. Some of ours end up running to 60. That's fine. You can manually change them on a per test basis. Apparently we set them to 60 seconds more often than I think we do. But so this test, for example, was timing out after. These approved holiday tests were timing out to 30 seconds. So we just changed the timeout to 60 seconds by default.
You're going to try to run them again locally?
I am trying to run them again locally. It requires to run locally, you need Abdu up and running basically. So you need the backend serving requests. You need something on your machine serving the front end code. So I'm just starting the front end and the back end again, and just seeing if they'll work for me this time. I am just sitting at the head of develop, so they probably should. But we'll see.
There's some components that I've seen that on projects that like the re-rendering is like crazy and it re-renders like 1,000,000 times. Would that potentially cause issues when trying to do these types of tests?
No, if it works on a browser, if it works for a regular user in a browser, it will work for these tests.
Okay, because it does the await, but it's waiting for the page to load, right? So if the page is loaded, but it's just re-rendering a shit ton of times, it's not going to know what render to kind of use, if you get what I'm saying.
If you're talking about React re-renders, I don't think in the virtual DOM changed the HTML DOM, which is what this actually runs over. So it should be fine with constant React re-renders, although you should fix that anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you're seeing unless you're seeing the page flickering as a user, that I guess that's wrong in the first place, right? If things keep changing and moving about, but I guess with the it's not going to just wait for that page to load. It's going to wait for the thing the locator that it's looking for to load. So if there's loads of them and it still hasn't loaded yet, as long as within the 30-second or whatever timeout window you have, if it appears, then it's fine. Because it's going to go, page loaded, I'm done. I'm not going to wait anymore.
Because all I'm thinking is if something renders and it shows something, but it's not like been initialized properly and it's got no value, for example, and then 50 renders later it gives it a value, the test might pick it up as negative when it's just the way that the component's been built is just.
But then the question is should
you just change your selectors. If your selector selects on an ID but the actual data doesn't fill in until a second later when your HTTP request returns, then change your select on text, for example.
Oh, I see okay.
It will sit and wait until its condition is fulfilled. You decide what its condition is.
We did have this problem on Abdu though, so it is a real problem that you can come across. So one of the things that we came across quite early was when you set up your account, you fill in a pop-up for the first time, and on one of the forms we had the same behavior. If you filled in the form, it flickered, it would clear the form then back down again before you could then proceed. And the test was so quick in PlayWright, it filled in the form and went to proceed, and it re-rendered, cleared the form, and then it wouldn't proceed. So it presented as an issue where it couldn't find or couldn't execute the next button because it was disabled. You can fall into that trap where if the UI isn't behaving properly, the test will fail. But it's usually pretty obvious because you can kind of, what you'll see with Nick running it now, you can actually see that happening, and that's how we were able to tell what was going wrong, because it was just a timeout. And the thing to do there is either you can ham-fist it by putting a forced timeout in at the start and wait for that page to do all of its flickering. Obviously not recommended, but it will get you past it, or fix the underlying issue that's causing the re-renders. Depends on the priority of sorting out the flickering.
Yeah.
There we go. So it's running. So you can see it runs reasonably quickly. That was it resetting the accounts. That was it tearing down the stuff. And now I'm gonna run the full test suite. It will run for 20 minutes. We don't have to sit and watch for 20 minutes. But yeah, it just will go through. It sets up the account, types in the things I tell it to type in. Says you've got no manager. And what's happening here is we're switching context. This is the context that Damon was talking about. We're actually opening up a new page for these ones, but there are ones where we just open up a new context. Because we're logging in as the employee, and then we're logging in as the manager, and opening up a new context effectively opens up a new private browsing window. It gets rid of all your cookies, all your session storage and stuff. So it's useful if you want to log into multiple accounts.
It's
Say
very cool to
request
watch
holiday. And then it is, I think it's really snazzy. Other people have told me that actually it's just like not that fun, but I think it's really fun to sit and watch the computer like click through your website.
And obviously this works in headless mode, so you don't actually have to watch it.
Yeah, you don't sit and watch this. It doesn't. It runs in headless on the server.
Yeah.
How do we know that you're not just doing this right now for the demo because it wasn't working?
Hands up! Put your hands up! Put your hands up!
Hands. Okay.
You can see my mouse. Look, here's my keyboard.
How do we know that you're not using your feet?
I'm glad you said feet.
There we go. There we go.
Magic.
Okay.